Okay, so here we go. We're going through the Bible in a year. We're saying we're going at 230 miles an hour, and or from 30,000 feet, however it is you might want to look at that. Well, now that we're going so fast at 230 miles an hour, it seems like we're going to have a train wreck. We're going to bump into ourselves here. We're going to have an accident. What do we mean by that? Well, we are in the 12 historical books, 12 of them. And we saw that those were Joshua and Judges and 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and these historical books that we were looking at. And now we are still in them, but we are now in the books of, chronologically, they would go Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. Fair enough. We did 1st and 2nd Samuel about David, King David, Solomon, and then we did 1st and 2nd Kings, where we saw some more about the kings of Israel, and then we saw 1st and 2nd Chronicles, which talked about the kings of Judah, the kings in the south. 1st Chronicles was talking about mostly David, and 2nd Chronicles, the rest of the kings of the south, and mostly about, all of their good things that they did, and the other book of Kings talked about the good and the bad kings. So, fair enough. We came to the end of the age of the kings. We came to the end of the age of the kings. So the northern kingdom first fell to the Assyrians in 722, but let's just say 700, easier for us to just think about 700. So that northern kingdom falls to Assyria. Why did it fall? Because they were in disobedience to God. They were worshiping idols. They were worshiping all kinds of other gods. They were immoral, and the nations around them would come and attack them, and they would get weaker and weaker and weaker. And eventually, like we said, around the year 700, that's going to work for us, the Assyrians finally conquer the northern kingdom, and the northern kingdom falls apart. So there it is, 10 tribes, it's fallen apart. Well, the southern kingdom, Judah, they keep going on. They go on for quite a while, really. They go on for another 140 years or so. But they're weakening too. Why are they weakening? Well, they get into the Word of God, they let it go a little bit, they let some idolatry come in, and it's just sort of a downward spiral. It's a little bit slower, and sometimes some of the kings bring some revivals. The revivals never seem to really be quite complete enough as they should be, but they bring in these revivals, they start looking at the Word of God again, they start bringing in the Passover, those kinds of things. But eventually, the southern kingdom as well falls. It's starting to get complicated, right? So it's the age of the kings. The northern kingdom has fallen to Assyria. Southern kingdom is still going on for another, 140 years or so. It falls. And when it falls to Babylon. Well, how come it fell to Babylon? Well, because Assyria was ruling, and then Babylon overtakes Assyria. So try to follow that secular history. Assyria was in power. Another power was arising, Babylon. Babylon conquers them. And then Babylon is the one that conquers Judah. And when Babylon conquers Judah, they go into exile. They take them all and they bring them to Babylon. They didn't bring them all, but for the most part, let's just say they brought them all, because it essentially ends up sort of like that, right? Sometimes when it says all in the Bible, it doesn't mean every single person. It just means, as we would say, all of them went, everybody went to the basketball game. Well, everybody didn't go to the basketball game, but the way that we use the language is everybody went to the basketball game. Well, who's excluded? The ones that are excluded is the ones that didn't go. So when you're using the word all of them went, who are you talking about? Well, we're talking about all of them, except for who? Except for all of those who didn't go. So it's okay to use language like that. So for the most part, all of them go into exile in Babylon. And they're there for 70 years, just like Jeremiah had prophesied. Wait a minute. Now it's really confusing, because we're saying that Jeremiah told them that they would go into exile for 70 years. Well, the problem is, when we're looking at the Bible chronologically, we're getting to these historical books, right? We're looking at Ezra, Esther, Nehemiah, right? We're looking at those books. If you go forward, you will come into the prophets. You'll come into Isaiah, and you'll come into Jeremiah, and you'll come into Ezekiel, and you'll come into Daniel. Well, those prophets, in terms of chronological order, belong way over here. So even prior to the books that we're looking at now, Esther and Nehemiah and Ezra, the prophets should be before that. But they come after that. And that's why this part of the Bible, when people get to this part of the Bible, reading it chronologically, it gets very confusing to people because it's very difficult to follow what's going on. Those prophets belong before the books we're looking at now. But we have the order that we have it, and we could have done it chronologically, but we're just going through the English Bible the way that the English Bible is arranged. So it's arranged in that way. So what have we been saying? The age of the kings is over. We had Genesis, we had the book of the law, the Torah, where God gave the law to the people. In the book of Exodus, he brought them out of Egypt. Joshua brings them into the land. In Judges, they're living there, but they're messing up. You got a 400-year period there. It comes in, they start to have some kings, and then we look at the kings. Well, the age of the kings is over. And the people, Judah, the Jews, the Israelites, all of those people, they're essentially in Babylon, in exile. Okay. So the books that we're looking at now, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther, are when they come back. So they go into Babylon for 70 years, and these books are about when they come back. But keep in mind that the big prophets are prophesying before they even go in. But yet, chronologically in the book, they're after this particular point in history. A little bit confusing? Sure. And then even the way that we're looking at these books right now, even the way that they are ordered here for us, they're out of order. Here we have Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. That's the order that we're looking at. But really, Esther should come first. Because Esther, hope all of this isn't too confusing. Our job is to try to make it simple. Esther is in Persia. Well, how'd she get into Persia? Well, she didn't really have to get anywhere, because what happened was the Assyrians were ruling, right? And when the Assyrians were ruling, they conquered the northern kingdom, 722 BC. So sometime later, in 586, the southern kingdom falls. And so when the southern kingdom falls, they go into Babylon, because Babylon had conquered the Assyrians. The Assyrians who conquered the northern kingdom are now conquered by Babylon. So essentially, Assyria becomes Babylon. Make sense? So when Babylon takes over Israel, or Judah, however you want to look at it, they deport them, exile them to Babylon. So they're living there in Babylon for 70 years, and they'll come out in the 70 years. Well, what happens to Babylon that was ruling during this period, during this time, then what happens is Persia conquers Babylon. Persia conquers Babylon. So if you were Jewish and you were in exile in Babylon, when Persia conquers you, you're now part of Persia. So when Esther comes around, she's part of Persia. She's part of Persia. The Persians are ruling. And so then afterwards, we will see, in order, it's Ezra, but Ezra is not in order there, and then Nehemiah. It's all backwards. Really, it's Esther in Persia, and then it would be Ezra who is going to Judah to encourage the people there, and then it would be Nehemiah. So I hope that's not too confusing, because that's about as far as we go today. So we will be looking at Esther, Ezra, and Nehemiah, and we'll be looking at each one of them. But keep in mind that it's all mixed up here, but these are post-exile. The exile is over for the most part, and they're all going back. That doesn't mean some still haven't stayed. That's where it gets confusing. Some are still staying. Some are still trickling back to the land. A lot of stuff happening. People are settled in. They settled into Babylon. Now they got to go back. So we will be looking at these books in the order that it is in the English Bible. We'll be looking at it as Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther, and looking at each one of them. We're going to spend one day on each one of those books. And hopefully by the time we get to the end of those, it will make sense, and then we'll sum it up again. And hopefully it will make total sense for us as we try to stick the prophets into all of the various periods of 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah. It's going to be a job, but I think we're going to be able to do it. So stick with us. If that was a hard one, it's because it's a little crazy. And what's crazy? People sin, and when people sin, it makes everything nutty. So bless you guys. We'll move on into those 3 books, Ezra, Esther, and Nehemiah. Hey, blessings.